What's going on, Wildcatters? Welcome back to another episode of the Willing Gas Stars podcast. Colin's out. He ate the green chilies in New Mexico, tore his stomach up. So it's just me and Kevin from Jetrock Analytics today. What's up, man?
Hey, how are we doing?
Doing good, bud. Are you from Houston?
I did grow up outside of Houston.
Okay.
Shout out to Pecan Grove.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you at now?
In Austin.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
So a lot of oil and gas data in Austin.
Yeah, tons. I mean, obviously you get the big guys out there. You get Enverus, formerly Drilling Info, office out of Austin.
Yeah. And to go right. So me and my co-founder, we worked at Drilling Info before starting Jetrock. So that's our pedigree. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That makes more sense now. Okay. Really quickly. So before we get into that, what is Jetrock Analytics for everybody listening?
Yeah. So Jetrock, what we do, we work mainly with upstream oil and gas companies with the goal to help them manage what they measure is the real simple version of that. So the operators, they have data divided up among a bunch of different data systems. You have your accounting data, your field data, geology, land. What we do, we come in, we act as the analytics group for that company. So we're like the connective tissue that brings all those different data sets together into a centralized location. And then like my half of the company is to put analytics on top of that, whether that's interactive business intelligence dashboards like through Spotfire or Power BI, or there's definitely a group of people that just want like alerts in their inbox, like PDF or Excel based. And so we do all that. So we handle the analytics pipeline from acquiring the data, getting into a centralized location, and then producing like the colorful charts that people actually get excited about. So handle it from end to end. And we're relatively small. Like we work with about a dozen companies right now. But we're their group doing all kinds of different analytics projects. We've been doing this since 2015.
Interesting. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording about my background and stuff. Maybe we'll go into that on this podcast. So sorry if you heard that story a million times over the last 4 years. But I'm curious on the notification side, right? So you said for one, there's dashboards, right? And everybody's got Spotfire these days or Power BI, things like that, right? That they love to use. But what's interesting is you said also possibly sending it to the inbox and either getting PDFs or other sorts of notifications. Have you guys done any work with like Slack? Because we use Slack as for one, it's all of our internal communication. That's kind of the primary use. However, secondary that we've really built every single one of our tools that we use, almost every single one of them, from the CRM to the marketing tools to the website to the chatbot on the website to anything that's really moving and there's sort of notifications. All of those notifications flow through Slack and notify the respective teams. And so like everybody has visibility into everything that moves.
Yeah. So we have a client who uses Slack and those email notifications, it goes out to people's inboxes, but we also email it to a Slack channel. Okay. And then that distributes out. I don't use Slack myself, so I don't really know like what pings around inside of that.
Wait a second. Wait, you're telling me you're a tech guy and you're not using Slack. What do you guys use for communication?
GChat. Like
GChat.
We're a Google-based approach.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That and actually Asana, like I don't get paid by Asana, but like I love that. It's task management software. Yeah. You can comment on tasks and stuff in there. So we use that more as like our moment to moment messaging.
Yeah. Particularly if you guys are like developers, that makes more sense. Right. As opposed to just hopping on. Yeah. We obviously we're not a development shop or anything, so we don't have an Asana or Jira or anything like that. So everything makes more sense in Slack. But it's interesting. Like I know especially on the oil and gas side, Microsoft is definitely kind of like the dominant player here. Everybody's on the Microsoft suite, and so it's Teams, right? Which they have their product that's very similar to. I don't know if it's Teams itself or if it has a different name that's very similar to Slack and a lot of the same kind of functionality.
Yeah, a lot of our clients use Teams. We started with Gmail, and just it's hard to make the switch. Like we like that approach. We use Microsoft for like our cloud hosting stuff. Like we use Azure for all that sort of thing. So mainly we're Microsoft based.
Yeah. So let's go into your background. So I know you talked about Enverus, but let's go back like even before that. Like how'd you get into the industry?
So way back, I went to UT for undergrad, started out working in the aerospace industry for orbital sciences, actually designing satellites, like stuff going up to the International Space Station.
Wait, how'd you get into that?
Nepotism, like pure nepotism. My uncle was an astronaut.
Okay.
So I got to go, like when I was a kid, I got to go to a couple of space launches.
That's awesome.
And I was at mechanical engineering for undergrad, and he made a phone call for me to Johnson Space Center and helped me get an internship. So I've done that. I managed. He helped me get the first internship. I did it. I was able to go back 2 more times, so they must have liked me enough that it was worth keeping me on. And space is still a big interest of mine. Coming from Houston, like I've kind of like followed like the 2 main, space and oil and gas are kind of the 2, 2 big things if you're from Houston.
So was it? So, did you lose interest in, or not like lose interest, but like career wise, you just want to go different?
So I'd say like 2008 when like oil was at $147 a barrel, like during that spike. I really got intrigued by just the international implications. People talk about like how it touches every aspect of life. Like,
did any of your family come from oil?
No, actually.
Okay.
No. Construction and yeah.
So that
one
is
of the few people that are not. Yeah.
Oil a lot of people are definitely like at least second generation, if not like third, fourth, fifth generation. So it's always interesting. Like me, I mean, technically my grandfather worked for El Paso Energy, but he was a civil engineer. So I mean, he was just building platforms and stuff like that. But nobody else in my family ever worked in energy at all. And so I was like the first one. So it's interesting.
Yeah, my family's more like beer based.
Beer based? What do they like, work for Anheuser-Busch or something?
So my great grandfather and then grandfather, they owned a Miller beer distributorship like around Victoria, like south. And they supply like a lot of the Eagle Ford area. Okay. I think recently they sold out sort of like to the larger corporate entity, but growing up, it was a lot of like you couldn't drink Budweiser, like it had to be Miller products. Yeah. But I didn't answer your initial question of like how did I actually get into oil and gas? So the energy situation like in the late 2000s really got me interested. I was thinking about going to grad school after having done an undergrad. So I actually was able to go to MIT for grad school for a master's degree, but it was focused on like solar energy. And so my first job out of college was doing wind and solar energy analysis for a company in Austin, like a consulting company where the point of that was for a wind or solar project to get financed, the bank would require like an independent energy assessment. And so I was, at the time, I was kind of a number monkey. Like you'd spend a month like grinding on a bunch of data and then come up with a report that they could use to get their financing. Which I learned a lot, but it was very structured and there wasn't a lot of room for creativity. So I was applying for other jobs. I was in Austin. Drilling Info had an opening in their analytics group, so I was able to make the leap there. So jumped from the renewable side to the
what
gas
year
side.
What's your year was the transition for you?
2012, I think, is when I started at Drilling Info.
Okay, so Drilling Info had already been around for I don't really know how long at that point.
10, 12 years at that point. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I started working in the analytics group of Drilling Info. It was there was 4 or 5 guys. How
big was the company at that time?
I think like 400 people. So it was pretty big, but it's gotten way bigger since then. And I shared like a cube pod with Justin Birmingham, who's my co-founder at Jetrock. So we would both get in kind of early in the morning before most other people, and so we'd have both time to work on projects that we were both involved in, but we were also able to just kind of talk about a lot of different things in life and that sort of thing. We formed a good working relationship there. So eventually Justin stepped out on his own to start doing consulting. So Justin is he's more of a data engineer. So building ETLs, writing views to bring different data sources together. So he does that work and then feeds it to me. And I'm more I call myself an analytics engineer is kind of the title that I've bounced around with a couple of different ones. But I'm the one who like makes like the pretty charts and dashboards. But shout out to Justin. Like you can't do any of that unless you do like the 75% of the work to get the data right first. So Justin and I worked together. He went off to start consulting for an upstream operator. Then after a year, we'd been kind of talking off and on, decided I'd join him and we started Jetrock. And so
what year was that?
2015. Okay. So yeah, we're almost 8 years into it.
Great time. Everything's crashing in 2015.
It started crashing. I feel like it really started crashing like 6 months after we started.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of been like it's never not been crashing, right? Like as soon as it stops crashing, it starts crashing again. So we started out with one client. First couple of years, we were mainly doing like business development type work with public data sources like Enverus, IHS, those sorts of things, helping companies evaluate operators, acquisitions. What are people doing with spacing? What landing zones should be targeting, EURs, all those sorts of things. Definitely still do that. But in the last three years or so, like the industry has very much shifted towards internal data analysis. So that's like, we call it financial and operations data, FinOps. So that's tying together things like their accounting data with their reservoir engineering data, with field cost estimates, tank volumes, their land like expirations. Companies have, so this gets into kind of like the main thrust of what we do now is, companies have all these different data sources. So we don't sell like a software package. We are a team that comes in, hooks all those different softwares together into a data structure in Azure that we can come in and deploy. That's all fairly automated, or like we can just come in and start hooking up things. But then we have a custom front end where if you want Spotfire, we'll build Spotfire. If your CEO is old school and he has like an Excel format that needs to be matched, like we generate that and send it out to him. Because we've definitely found over the years, like there can be an initial wave of like business intelligence, like we're going to use these tools, and like the CEO might say that and people nod their head, and maybe a couple people do. Like there's definitely people I get a ton of value out of that type of software, and so do people there are people at the companies that do that, but there's also people who really, they don't want to learn anything new, but they want to know which wells are down, which wells are underperforming, or I need to know when we overrun our AFEs, that sort of thing. And so that's where several years ago, we started doing both, where if you just want like a nice, pretty PDF report that goes to 4 people in the morning, we generate that. You can have the equivalent type of work in Spotfire, so that you can kind of more dig into the details, which you can't do in a PDF report. But having both of those pieces is really, it allows you to touch a lot more parts of the company.
Mm-hmm. So how did you, so the initial leap, was that just kind of through word of mouth or maybe existing clients and stuff like that? And then how does like BD kind of like evolve for you guys over time?
What do you mean the initial leap?
The initial leap of going from, you guys Enverus to doing your own thing. And you said your partner was already consulting with an E&P there. And then how did you guys grow from like beyond the one client?
Yeah. So until a year ago, it was all word of mouth. So it was, we had a client, thankfully, like with steady initial money coming in. And then actually, so we have several of our early clients. We have a partner who owns an IT consulting company, and he has a stable of oil and gas companies. So he, like when people express frustration about their data or want to be able to do more, he could say, hey, I know some people you can talk to. Yeah. And so he was able to help us get several early clients. We've been able to return the favor since then of like, people that are our clients, we can pass his way for IT services. So that was huge because, a couple of smart guys in a room writing code won't sell a lot of products. Like if that's your main approach. So, so Peter, whose company is Robo IT Consulting Services, he helped us definitely get off the ground. Then we benefited a lot from just the expansion of the industry. We would have people who would be like a CFO or a COO of one of the oil and gas, like one of our current clients would leave, start a new company, get PE funding, and then bring us in. Yeah. So we kind of rode that wave. And then about a year ago, we actually hired a director of business development. So actually focused on meeting people, like starting conversations rather than just them have, occasionally they spontaneously come our way. It's still a lot of word of mouth though. Like a new client that we're going to start with at the beginning of the month was just, somebody that we had worked with before. They moved on to another company, a conversation happened, and then they called us. So that's the best marketing that you can get. It's hard to hit the accelerator on that because conversations kind of happen at their own pace. But we've grown one company at a time. So like I said, we're working with 12 right now. Okay. A year ago it was 6. Like after when COVID hit and everybody pulled back, we lost I think 2 clients. So we had been kind of like in the 8 client range for a while. But yeah, we've doubled in size in the last year. So that's
What's the team up to?
What's what?
How big is y'all's team now?
We're 7 employees.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
so pretty small team. Like we're very, very focused on doing things efficiently. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all about automation, so there's not a lot of busy work around to bring on more headcount.
Absolutely.
So
is it mostly like retainer basis, or is it like on a project basis?
It's fixed fee. One of like the kind of the core like lessons of trying to run a consulting business that we've adopted is like we don't work on an hourly basis. We don't work on a project basis. Like we need to find customers that want to partner with us over the life of their company, and that's how it generally works with our clients. That way, yeah, it's a fixed fee every month, just based on like the general scope of what we're working on.
Is the scope usually the same across companies, or is it differ greatly?
I mean, the main division is whether we're just doing FinOps, like the internal data analysis, or we're also doing business development work. So that would be helping them evaluate deals and pulling in those public data sources. That's the main dividing line. But in general, we want the engagement to be as open as possible, where any idea or problem they have, they just email. Like we want to be part of the team, as opposed to there's definitely other approaches where like every time a company needs something done, they have to negotiate a scope of work, and it ends up being this big like there's a lot of friction involved in actually getting that work done.
Yeah.
So and I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but remember like America Online used to be the main thing. There was a time where you paid by the minute, and then they introduced this new like for $20, I think it was $20 a month. It was unlimited time, and it like crashed AOL because like once you remove that sort of like, oh, like I feel the meter ticking, people got a lot more comfortable in using it and used it way more. And that's the approach that we take. It's like what people with their employees, like you don't think about paying them like every hour. You're a resource that we have to solve the problems that our company has, and that's how we line ourselves up.
So are you working with E&Ps specifically?
Mainly, upstream operators. We have a couple of mineral buying companies.
Okay. Yeah.
We've worked with several midstream companies in the past, but our main bread and butter are like PE backed upstream.
Okay. So that's kind of like that's like the bulk of what you guys are working with.
Yeah, because I think you need to be big enough where you have a bunch of data and money to spend, but not so big that you have like a 20-person analytics team that wants to do the stuff themselves.
So I mean, you guys are in the weeds with these companies every day, and have been for quite some time. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see that they are facing from the stuff that you guys are seeing? Obviously, from like the tech side, the data side, things like that, and how has that kind of evolved over the last couple of years?
So one thing that comes to mind is understanding like what money have we spent. That there can be a long lag before. If you're waiting for your field expenses to show up in your accounting system, that can be 30, 60, 90 days after the fact. So you could have a huge cost overrun on a drilling project, and you're happily like drinking your coffee in the morning, unaware of it until project's over, the rig's gone, and then you're watching your total spend in your accounting system like go up and up and up, and you're just wondering like, when is this going to stop? Like the work already happened. Like the knowledge could be there. So
is nobody moving to an accrual basis and capturing field expenses live?
Well, so I mean that's part of what we're doing. It depends on what data sources the companies have, but it's the way to do that. The way to get more live with it is to combine like your field cost estimates, like your field tickets with your accounting system, so that you can have yesterday we spent $25,000 and then the report goes out the next day saying that.
Reconcile the AFEs.
Yeah, well, so what you're talking about there is like, so we do an AFE tracker for a bunch of companies. So the three main numbers to compare your AFE budget, your accounting actuals, and then your field cost estimate. So the field cost estimate should be the most up to date, but companies aren't necessarily great. Like the field guys aren't necessarily great about putting in all the expenses. So one of the reports we generate, it's got those three numbers. Like it usually comes out once a week. That's probably the right cadence that people want to see it. But one of the flags in the report is are your actuals higher than your field estimates? Because that should never be the case, because the money spent, the people in the field know about it before the accountants do.
Yeah.
So that's one way of flagging that you're not doing as good of a job as you could on data entry. Like, people are spending money without actually entering into the system.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of gets into, like, part of what we do too is helping companies QC their own work. So sending out alerts when something like that happens, or if like with open invoice, like if an invoice fails to load, they don't necessarily know that, but like this file deep in the weeds gets generated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got a process that goes in and looks for, okay, are there any new versions of any new files in this folder? And if there are, send it to the accounting team so they know that a file they uploaded didn't make it into the system. Like, it's pretty basic stuff. But if you think you're uploading things and you're not, then you start getting vendors calling saying, like, why aren't my invoices being paid? And it's a tricky process to unwind it, to figure out, like, well, what happened.
So any other big issues that you've seen in the last couple of years?
Any other big issues? I mean, the other, it's really like keeping a tight rein on your expenses. So everybody wants an interactive LOS so that they can cut it from company level down to the individual well level. Downtime and well underperformance is something we do for a bunch of companies. So that's taking your like, underperformance would be taking your daily actuals with your reserves forecast, which live in two different systems. And so if you're just relying on your reservoir engineers, it's not so easy to get that data together, to see it, and also to do that on a repeated basis. I mean, you might be able to twist people's arms to pull something together for you once if you're the CEO, but maybe you get that once a month. So we tap into both those data sources, generate a report on a daily basis that you're seeing how well your wells are performing against your forecast. It's easy to flag the ones that are underperforming. You pair that with like a downtime report. So, like, which wells are down? Why are they down? Again, some of that seems kind of basic, but it's getting it out of the various, like, bespoke data systems that they live in and getting it to everyone else in the company. Like, there's typically like one person who really knows how to use, like, each one of the softwares. And if it's not that person doing the work, everyone else has to just kind of email them and ask, like, hey, what's going on here? So it's slow. It's kind of opaque.
So since you guys are going in and, like, essentially bringing together all these different data silos, are there any, like, new softwares, new technologies that some of these companies are starting to use, or you're starting to see kind of pop up more and more?
So there's some new, like, on the reservoir engineering side, you'll see there's some, like, older incumbents like Aries and PhD Wind getting challenged by like Combo Curve.
Yeah.
So you see like, every one of our clients has a different combination of data sources, and that's part of why there's a role for us, is that if there was just one version of, if everyone had just the exact same software, it would be fairly easy for, like, a really big company to come in and build, like, a connector, but everyone's got their own favorite things. So other new softwares coming in. So another thing, so ESG is, I want to bring it up just because, like, there's a lot of talk about it. I'll say that there's been some dabbling on interacting with ESG data sets or generating it out of their own data, but I'd say it's pretty tepid. Like, I think everyone's in the mode of kind of doing what whoever above them says they have to do. So I'll say that's one that I haven't seen, like, for all, like, the talk about it, I haven't seen a ton of movement on it.
I think there's a lack of kind of clear guidance, for one, like what's actually going to be regulated. Two, there's no standards. There's been a lot of people that are coming into this space, but naturally nobody really wants to be the one who's kind of out front in the space. Everybody wants to kind of be middle of the pack. And so we're kind of waiting to see what's going to kind of gain market share and gain adoption, right? So
yeah, I went to an ESG conference earlier this year to just try to absorb more of what was going on. And one of my takeaways is, like, everybody's kind of waving their hands at this. Like, nobody, even the people that are, like, presenting, it doesn't seem like anybody's really figured out what we're supposed to do here. It's like, what's expected of the industry. Like, we're not, we're aware of it, but we're not really sure like what we need to get done.
I mean, I think it starts with tracking, right? And particularly if it's like, hey, we want to track kind of our own emissions and subsequently reduce those or decarbonize our operations, however you want to put it. Starts with tracking, right? And so lots of sensors. But then from there, once you have that, you're able to actually quantify, and then from there, put together some sort of remediation plan to be able to lower that. I think I saw a stat this last week that I thought was really interesting. The Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI, is a consortium of, I don't know exactly how many, probably like 15, 20 of the world's largest E&Ps. And since 2017, they've collectively lowered their emissions by 40% by investing $40 billion in a lot of different things. So there's things that are happening, but yeah, I think that particularly if you're working with like the private equity backed companies don't have the luxury of having like tens of thousands of people like a lot of these larger super majors do. And so they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to be able to even kind of focus on things like that, unless it's something that is like packaged up, buttoned up, ready to go, and you can kind of deploy that very, very easily. Yeah.
And so I two other things came to mind. So one, there's companies that sell like satellite imagery, like they're doing, we're not doing this ourselves, but there's companies that do like machine learning, like looking for pad development, that sort of thing. We have companies that are sort of trying to get ahead of the drill bit. Before you have permits filed with the Railroad Commission, you have pending permits that are filed that you get like a day or two before. Before that is they're out there maybe doing some dirt work. So those are data sets that we've started integrating recently that clients have signed up for. I lost my train of thought again. There was a second, what's the other new thing? Oh, actually, I'm sure like you probably had a bunch of guests that you talk about like crypto and Bitcoin.
Yeah.
There's a group of guys that they used to be an operator, or they used to be part of one of our clients. They've gone out and done more like crypto mining, where we're still in discussions with them about working, but it's an oil and gas team that's transferred themselves over to doing getting server racks and that sort of thing, and want to do analytics on server downtime. And like, there's a lot of things that are analogous in the oil and gas space.
The entire Bitcoin mining business model is very similar to oil and gas production. So instead of, barrels that are flowing, you've got terahash.
Yeah. And I'm no expert on it yet. But there does seem to be, they're kind of becoming like cousin industries, a lot of flow from the oil and gas side over to Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, the next podcast that I'm recording today is as a new show. You guys are hearing it first. I haven't talked about any energizing Bitcoin. So it's a intersection of energy and Bitcoin mining podcast with a lot of the guys that are been leading the way since like day one. So cool. It's a super, super interesting space. I don't know if you saw our Empower event that we did in March, which was focused on Bitcoin mining again. And if you told me like 5 years ago that we'd be doing anything with Bitcoin mining in the energy industry and the energy industry actually being interested in it, I'd be like, there's absolutely no way. But it's so wild. I think that once you see the implications of Bitcoin mining and being able to put it on assets that are stranded or energy that is stranded, and it not only for one make it economical, but totally change the game. There's certain things that once you see, you can't unsee. And it's just a natural kind of relationship. And a lot of the guys that come from oil and gas are really the best suited to be these Bitcoin miners, right? They have like the technical acumen and the experience, particularly if you're going to be using something like flared natural gas to be able to power the Bitcoin mining machine. So I would expect that you guys will probably be getting a lot more interest, people asking you questions about that coming up.
Yeah. And then past that, like there's always a new accounting system. Like there's
really
of all the,
that's actually kind of like surprising to me, because I thought there was like a couple like just like big legacy players.
Not like one that never existed before, but just companies use there's just so some new ones. So Qbyte is one that we hadn't heard of before. Heard of that. That's one. Yeah. This isn't new, but like Wolfpack.
Wolfpack's been around a long time.
Okay, so Wolfpack, Qbyte, Bolo,
OGSys,
Inertia. But then OGSys, like there's now like on demand. There's like the cloud version of it.
Yeah.
So there's 5 or 6 different accounting softwares that we're used to working with, and then there's 4 or 5 reserves engineering ones. So it's part of the magic to it is getting all those different sources, but then normalizing so that it all comes back to like a set of core tables and views that we can use to do what we normally do. So just from many different raw ingredients, like we can consolidate it down to the type of reporting that like the C-suite actually cares about.
Yeah. Man, I can't speak too much to like the oil and gas accounting systems, but like just generic accounting systems in general. Like we've played around with so many of them. There needs to be like accounting systems for people who don't understand accounting. Like, it makes it super.
TurboTax is like,
essentially like a TurboTax.
Do you want to add a new well?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like almost like maybe like the Nesh style, like how they have like their chatbot, but maybe it's like accounting via chatbot. It's like, I want to know this. Like, how do I find that? Right. It's like QuickBooks is, even as popular as it is, it's kind of like a shit show in terms of the user experience. Yeah, they've rebuilt it again recently, and I think it's slightly better. But unless you have a good understanding of like how accounting actually works, which I've got like enough to like get by, but it's really hard to use and it's hard to understand. And
one of the best decisions that we ever made was to hire like a part-time, like an hourly bookkeeper to do our accounting for us. Because the first year or so of Jetrock, like I was doing the books, and it gave me so much anxiety of like, I've got no idea what I'm doing. Like I'm filing stuff here. I'm trying, like, I assume like I'm probably smarter than like the average person filing this, but like, I've got no idea. And it's just annoying. Like, cause it's not in any way like how, like it has to be done, but it's in no way like furthering the business. And so you're like angry while you're doing it. And like, I could look this up, but I'm just gonna say yes because this seems right.
Yeah.
And so we actually find a professional. Yeah. And that's maybe the analogy. Like the reason to work with Jetrock is same sort of thing. Like if you're trying to get your different data sources together and it's just a nightmare, it's like there are professionals out there who've done this before and can knock it out.
Yeah, I think it's having the self-awareness of knowing what you're good at and what you're not. And we did the same thing. We hired a consulting firm, Opportune, to come in, and these guys, brilliant. They're like way better at any of this than us, and it's been absolutely game changing for us. So, yeah, kind of the same thing there. What's the North Star for Jetrock? What does Jetrock look like 3 to 5 years from now?
I want to keep on the same path that we're on of staying close to our clients. Like I have personal relationships with like the teams that we work with because I'm on the phone with them or in their office working. So we're not just like a help desk ticket. So I want to keep that. I want to keep adding. There's a lot of, as this is the second podcast I've ever done. There's 97% of the people listening will have never heard of Jetrock before. So we are now actually trying to like let the industry know that we exist rather than just friends talking to friends.
Yeah.
But I want to keep, I like the business model that we've landed on of steady engagements with a relatively limited number of companies, like doing a bunch of different things. Like we're not just selling, here's one widget for your AFEs, or, you can buy our software and that's just it forever. Cause that's Justin and I, like coming out of Drilling Info, we wanted it to be more custom and more useful because there's advantages to being a big company and producing software that everybody uses, but it can end up being like useful to no one. Like everyone has it, but it's not that useful to anyone for what they're actually trying to do.
Because everybody has their own preferences of how they work, right?
Yeah, and everyone's got a different strategy. If everyone had the same strategy, no one would be making any money. Like everyone has to kind of find their own place in the industry. And it's really exciting to hear, like clients come to us with new ideas about like, okay, this is kind of crazy, but like, could we combine this and this? And those are the most fun projects to work on, to create something new. So I want to keep growing in that regard. We'll add staff as we need to. I mean, we're self-funded, like bootstrapped, profitable. Like we've
much respect. It's can relate. It's a hard journey.
Yeah, it's Justin and I really like being able to call the shots.
Yeah.
And grow the company the way that we want. So I think we'll probably stay on that route of old school, like earn more money that you spend on your business operations and then grow using that cash flow.
Just grow within cash flows.
Yeah.
Well, Dude, this is super exciting. It's still one of the, like I said, my whole background coming into the industry was working on a lot of the same problems that you guys are now. And it's still, in my opinion, one of the biggest issues. And it's an issue that continues to grow because as we're seeing now, there's a lot of momentum in this space. There's a lot of new people that are leaving their jobs, that have identified some problems that they want to solve and are building, new tech startups. And these companies are actually adopting them now. The issue is that now we've got more data than ever, and it's like, what do we do with it all, right? You said something about measuring earlier, and it's always like, I think the question is like, do you measure everything? I mean, because we've kind of gone down that path. A lot of companies have gone down that path, or do you really hone in on why are you measuring what you're measuring, and what is going to be the output, kind of like for that? And there's like never been this much data ever, and it's going to continue to kind of like compound. So I think you guys have lots and lots of runway moving forward as the industry continues to grow.
Some talk I listened to, like they talked about like the problem of data obesity, where if you measure everything, if you store everything forever, it can be impossible to find what you want. It's like kind of like a hoarder situation. And one of the way, like a philosophy that we have as we build things is like, you only grab the data you need. Like there might be 50 columns in a table, but if you only need 3 of them, only bring in 3. And if the client tells you, okay, I want to add operating area, then you go back and get it, because that keeps the whole data pipeline lean. It doesn't, I feel like that probably doesn't sound that profound, but it's easy to say, oh, we'll just bring in all the columns, like, and then we'll figure out what we need. But then you end up like that slows like project opening times down. It really, when you're in a call with a client and you have like a 200 column table and you're trying to find the Wolf Can't Be landing zone or whatever, you're sweating bullets because you can't find it. You wish that you had been a little bit more selective about what made it into your data set.
But is anybody like, but big data, we need all of this, there's insights that we can extract from that? Or is that something that is so far like over the heads of like PE-backed operators?
Well, they leave it to us. They say, here are our data sources. And what I start with is like, what end result do you want to see? And then we work backwards from what do we need to prioritize getting first, like Justin does the digging into the guts of it and figuring out what's in what table to bring it together. But no one's demanding, you have to bring in all the data.
Yeah. So for anybody who's listening, how do they find you guys? Is it Jetrock?
JetrockLLC.com
is
the website. You'll find our info there.
And you're on LinkedIn, your partner's on LinkedIn.
I am, yeah. Kevin Thuot, THUOT. And also, so Zach Howard is our director of business development.
Okay. I think Zach's the one I talked to originally. Yeah.
He reached out. Happy to chat with anybody. I mean, it's good to know people in the industry, regardless of any kind of business relationship. So we're happy to talk and answer questions about data challenges.
Awesome, man. Dude, it was great talking. I love chopping it up over data.
Yeah.
Still, all these years later, it's something that's still I'm super interested in.
It's only getting bigger.
Yeah. It's continuing to become a larger problem. So I think you guys are very, very well positioned to continue to grow through that. So awesome.
Thanks. Good to meet you.
Absolutely. Guys, if you like the episode, take 2 seconds. Just open up your email, put a link in there, and share it with everybody that you work with. That's what we want. And I don't know when this episode is going to go out, but we will see you guys. If it's not at Fuse this year, it'll be Fuse next year. So take care. See you guys in the next episode.